I think the more that you can diffuse the high emotions related to finances and tap into the rational, calm, stable person that you are, the easier this is going to be for you. Hello and welcome to the Unlock Lab. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Tosca DiMatteo, and today is a big episode. Today is part of the Inner Critic series, and we're going to talk about that inner critic that tells you you can't afford it. And you can fill in the blank for whatever it is. This is an episode about money, mindset stuff, abundance, all the things that get in the way of you living your most fullest life. So before we get into all of that, let me just pause and stop and say, welcome if you're new to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here. You are here on a fiery one because I am super passionate about this financial inner critic. I've had to deal with it myself for many, many years, since perhaps I could even remember. But anyway, listen, I do work at the intersection of personal growth and professional breakthroughs. What does that mean? It means I help you get out of your own way in whatever goals that you have, even if you don't know what they are yet. I do this through one-on-one coaching. I do keynote addresses. I also do team facilitated conversations to help unlock what's possible for the future. If you want to learn more about what I do, visit coachtosca.com. All right. So listen, again, I have to say, like last week, I did the episode about what to do when you're in between jobs. And I was like, oh my gosh, how is this episode 70? How haven't I talked about this yet? But I've talked about all these like little pieces right throughout this podcast. And I think the same goes for this episode. Wow, how have I not done the inner critic that's around financial scarcity and money worries? And I know I've talked about it in different episodes in different ways, but this is going to be the full enchilada, my friends. Because let me tell you, our financial inner critic can come into play at the most inopportune times. Now, maybe your inner critic around finances isn't ever present all the time, but maybe it comes up in certain situations. Whatever the case is for you, I'm glad you're here because this is so important for us to find a place that we can live from that is a place of plenitude, if that's even a word, a place of abundance. And, you know, that word is thrown around a lot, but like it is definitely one that I've come to really appreciate because abundance is not just about financial, it's about all the ways that we have what we need, all the ways that we have the things that we want, whether that's financial resource, whether that's love, whether that's access, whether that's support, whatever that is. But what I want to do is start with talking about what does this inner critic sound like? This one that has this financial scarcity mindset, the one that tells you you can't afford it. Well, what this inner critic can say is literally, hey, you can't afford it. Don't buy that thing. It can also say, that's not your money. You can't purchase that. And this in particular, right, might be in the case of maybe you have a partner, maybe you're married, and actually like your money is shared. So it is absolutely your money, but you tell yourself that it's not because you didn't earn it or it's not in your particular bank account or whatever the case might be. All right. The other things that your inner critic can say is that it's selfish for you to make that purchase, whatever that purchase is. It can also tell you that you shouldn't, that other people don't have that privilege to buy that thing, to go do that thing, to spend resource on that thing. So you shouldn't either. The other thing your inner critic can tell you is that that's a waste of money, right? You can fill in the blank about when would your inner critic tell you that something is a waste of money? Maybe it's a luxury item. Maybe it's something that you don't really need, but that you want. Maybe it's something that's an upgrade to what you already have, right? You get the point. Another thing your inner critic can say is, well, you'll never get your investment back, so you shouldn't buy that. And that can happen when you aren't even looking to get your investment back, but it finds a reason why you shouldn't buy that thing. It can also say to you, okay, you can get that, but get it when you have more in your savings. You can invest in that, but do it when you have money. You can go on that vacation, but not yet. You're supposed to have X dollars in your savings account before you go and do some vacation. Another thing that your inner critic can say in the realm of finances is, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which also means like, don't get a new one. Now, a lot of these I resonate with and have experience with. And some of these are also things that I know like my clients have experienced, right? So you get the point of what this inner critic might be saying to you. I think that also this inner critic in particular can also give you strong feelings, and maybe there's not even words to it. And I always say with all the inner critic stuff, right? Like it's often that recorded message on loop in your head, but it can also be a feeling. So I want you to really pay attention to that. This inner critic can bring up feelings of guilt, just to bring that to life, right? Like maybe you're doing better than some of your family members. And so you want to go and buy that thing and it makes you feel guilty because other family members can't afford that. Other feelings that might come up are shame. Like, do you feel like you're worthy of that thing that you're about to purchase? And this other idea of like gluttony, what we're taught about being and feeling abundant versus having just enough, these kinds of feelings can come up that bring you down, that make you feel contracted versus expansive. And so those are some things to kind of really pay attention to. As I say about our inner critics, really this work is about paying attention to what you're saying to yourself. And if you want to go back to the very first episode on the Inner Critic series, it's like Inner Critic 101. I think it might be episode 7. Don't quote me on it, but go way back to the beginning of this podcast and you'll get the intro to inner critics. So, my feelings of guilt, for example, as it relates to the financial piece, in the past has meant that I rescued people financially. And that maybe looked like I was buying lunch for somebody, or maybe I was buying something for somebody that they couldn't afford because I was guilty that I had more financial resource than they did. Now, yes, I have always been a generous person and I still am. But what I know about myself in doing this work is that it is a really good practice to inquire deeply about my motivations. Am I being motivated by guilt and feel like I should be rescuing somebody else financially? Or was I actually asked for support financially and I am able to do so? And therefore it's coming from a place of not rescuing, but of support? Am I doing this thing with no strings attached? Is what I'm doing actually being the most of service to others and to myself? So this is just an example of like, for me, how guilt maybe was a part of decision making that I wasn't aware of at some point, and then eventually I became aware of, oh, I'm being driven by guilt here versus driven by just pure generosity. And there's a big difference, right, in those intentions, whether they're conscious or not. So how do we do this work? How do we start to unpack what largely is conditioned beliefs about money, right? And what largely can be very damaging or detrimental to ourselves and to the life and the dreams that we have about our future? What do we do? Well, I have 6 key tips that I've kind of put together based on my many years of experience with this inner critic. But I do want to say, look, there are people that all they do is money, mindset, and abundance stuff. And, if you want to go even deeper, there's a lot of resources out there for this. But I want to share with you some really, I think, potent and powerful things that I've learned to help you on this journey of getting out of your own way as it relates to this inner critic that can often be running interference. Okay, so number 1, this isn't going to be a surprise if you're familiar with my inner critic work at all. But what I want you to do is ask yourself, what are all the thoughts that you have about money? And I don't want you to just think about it. I want you to write it down. And if it's helpful, even do some visualization around money. And the point of this is to really reveal your relationship that you have with money, because as with anything else, it's a relationship. Like you have a relationship with your friends, you have a relationship with your partner, you have a relationship even with your house, right? You also have a relationship with money. So, for example, many years ago when I was kind of excavating this for myself, one of the things I realized was that one of the sayings my grandfather had was, I don't want to be a millionaire. I just want to live like one. Now, think about it. And I started thinking about, well, what's behind this idea of I don't want to be a millionaire. I just want to live like one. Maybe the idea was maybe my grandfather had given up the hope of becoming a millionaire or making the kind of money that he wanted to. Maybe where he was coming from was he didn't want to have all the problems and challenges that rich people have. And so maybe he didn't want that for himself, but he wanted to be able to live comfortably or live the way that he wanted. But either way, this mantra deep in my bones of like, I don't want to be a millionaire is not true for me. I would love to be a millionaire, and I would love to be generous with that resource. And I would love to be able to generate the kind of value where that kind of money comes flowing to me because I'm offering reciprocal value in return, right? So I had to really sit there and say, and kind of tear it apart a little bit and be like, you know what? This is not the mantra that I want running through my veins, right? So that's just one example. And you'll kind of hear some other ideas of like, what do you do when you realize you have this like mantra in your head that's actually not serving you? That's going to come. But I do want to share one other story with you around this topic of asking yourself what all your thoughts are around money. So very early on in my life, right? I wanted to unwrite the story that so many women have around relying on a man for income, right? Like this is just generations and generations of kind of expectation, right? I, from a very young age, wanted to be financially independent. And look, that's not a bad thing, right? To want to be financially independent. But what happened is that there was a time in my life where there were other values that were more important to me than being financially independent. So when I was married, right, and I wanted to be a contributor to the financial household income, at the same time, I wanted to build a business and see what else was possible for my career. I had to look at these two things together and reconcile these two things because becoming an entrepreneur and building a business meant that I wasn't going to be able to financially contribute right away. I knew that that was not going to happen immediately. Now, I may have had some hopes about it, but it actually took me years to reconcile these two values that I had, one around financial independence and one around actually freedom to explore my gifts and my talents to service the world. It took me years to accept that there would be a period of my life where I had to rely on my husband for financial support. And that is still true to this day based on the lifestyle that we have. So these thoughts that we have, these beliefs that we have, these values that we have around money can sometimes butt up against other values. And I just want to bring that to your attention. And so doing this deep excavation, like journaling and come back to it over and over again. What do I think about money? And if you kind of feel like you run out of steam on that, then you can also think about situations in which you are spending money or you chose not to spend money on something and ask yourself, oh, why? Why did I choose that? Why did I not choose that? Because that will just give you more information about what your beliefs are around resources. Okay, so that is step one. Now, the second tip that I have, and these aren't necessarily in chronological order in terms of where to start and where to end. Although I do think asking yourself about what your thoughts are around money is a great starting point. The next advice that I have is to honor the money challenges that you have had in your life, because often these money challenges that you have had bring strong emotions, right? They bring a self-protection mechanism, which is your inner critic, right? It can bring up literal trauma. And so, really being aware of what has happened in my life. And maybe it's not even the challenges. Maybe it is the time where you were like super, super abundant and there were very strong feelings about that. So, it doesn't, it can go either way. But what I want you to do is write them all out. I want you to express it, flesh it out so that you can remember, right? Like this experience had a profound impact on me. Like maybe you had an experience where I'm making it up, but like maybe you had a huge windfall from inheritance and you had a lot of feelings about that. You were sad, but you were grateful. You felt embarrassed, whatever. And explore how you felt about it. What did you do? Did you feel good about the actions you took? Did you not? Were there regrets? And the same for like challenges. What was the context? What was going on? Like to this day, I remember very vividly the room that I sat in a banker's office when I was, oh my gosh, I was in college. It was in my early 20s. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have the money to pay my car payment. And I went in there to talk to them because I literally didn't know what to do. And I remember feeling powerless, embarrassed, about the situation. I also just remember being honest, like I'm worried. And that has stuck with me, right? Because deep in the recesses of my mind, I'm like, I don't want to be in that situation again. And therefore, if that is like this unconscious fear that I have, is it driving my choices? Is it driving my decisions? Is it driving my beliefs? You bet your bottom it does because it's still there somewhere, right? So I have to really pay attention to it. Now, here's a side note on that particular thing. At that time in my life, I actually created this habit of paying more on my car note than I needed to every month because I had learned at an early age that debt is not great, right? And paying interest rates is not ideal. And so what ended up happening in that particular conversation was she was like, "Oh, you actually don't have to pay the next month because you've already you've overpaid over time, so you're covered." So I didn't even know at the time that I had done myself a great service in the way that I was managing my money. But I digress. The point of me sharing that story is so that you can, do the excavation of those challenging moments, understand how they impacted you then, and maybe how they're impacting you still now. And the next thing I want you to do is I want you to journal about how you are different now versus when those things happened, because you are an entirely different person now. You're in a different situation, circumstance, mindset, life stage, perhaps even. And so, how are you different now? Because sometimes what happens is we don't realize, you know what? We're never going to make those same mistakes that we once made, or we're never going to make decisions the same way we once made because we've learned and we've grown and we're just not giving ourselves the credit for that. So, that is step 2. Honor your money challenges in your life, or maybe those times that were great, but you had feelings that were hard about it. And maybe there were times that were really hard and you had challenging feelings about it. And write about them, excavate them, and then talk about how you're different now versus then. All right. So, number 3 is now that you've done that excavation and looked at your past experiences, now that you have a better understanding of what your inner critic has been telling you, perhaps all your life or for many, many years, now I want you to journal. I want you to ask yourself what you truly believe about money and resources, because this is likely very different from what you've been conditioned to think. And there is definitely a difference between understanding the values that have been instilled into you and conditioned thinking and your own truth about what you think and feel and believe about money. So maybe what you're going to find is that you're someone that has an abundant mindset, actually, but you've been conditioned to think otherwise. Maybe you're actually someone that doesn't stress about money. It actually isn't something that you worry so much about, but you've been made to believe that you should be stressed. And therefore, you force yourself to be stressed. And I say this because I do know of people that actually aren't worried about things, even though the financial situation is a little bit rocky, but they think they're supposed to worry about it. And that is a conditioning. And that is something to be aware of so that you can set yourself free of what you think you're supposed to feel about it. And you know what? Way back in my youth, as a teen and in my 20s, one thing I used to say to myself about money is, it's okay, I can make more tomorrow. Like back then, I believed I could be the generator of more wealth. I liked having that perspective of like knowing that at any time I could be in control, or that like money wasn't this huge, heavy thing that I could just make more tomorrow, like, live for the day. And I'm not saying that I definitely was never one that was like spending, frivolously or like putting myself in a tough situation. But what I am saying is that I was free in my thinking and in my feeling about it. And I've evolved the way I think about money, resource, abundance. I'm still like working on it, but now I actually see a greater power involved in my resourcing and my abundance and my wealth. I see it as way bigger than just me, that it's not just about me and my generation of abundance, but that there's something far greater involved in my abundance and in my wealth that I experience. And that this supply is infinite. There is no pie that I get a slice of, but rather there's infinite resource. And that's all available to me. And I am one part of how that becomes possible to flow to me. So, this is just one of those things that we can really work on in terms of what is it that we want to say to ourselves? What is it that we believe about resource? And not just in that fake, like bullshit, spiritual bypassing, like didn't really do the work way, but what can we start to really build on in terms of our belief system, in terms of understanding how we see the world? And I'm not saying that the way that I'm expressing how I see abundance is right or wrong. It's just how I've come to find more expansion in it, less harshness with myself in it, and more freedom with it. And whatever that is for you, I wish that for you as well. If you like what you're hearing today, if it's helpful for you, then I am so glad. And I'm going to invite you to sign up for my newsletter because I publish lots of content to help you in times like these. All you have to do is visit the show notes and you'll find the link, or you can visit toscadimatteo.com/newsletter and sign up. I look forward to seeing you in your inbox. Tip number 4 is really all inclusive, but I want to say it specifically, which is really paying attention to what your inner critics are saying to you. I mean, that's what this work is really all about, right? And by paying attention, you can then pause and look at, well, what is the truth, right? And you've already done that work of like, what's the truth of what I believe? And what's the truth of this situation? And then you can choose what part of you wants to make the decision that's in front of you, right? About how you're spending your resource. So, for example, you can choose, I highly don't recommend this, but you can choose, I'm going to let my inner critic make the choice. My inner critic thinks I shouldn't buy this thing, so I'm not. What I would recommend is that there's another part of you that's more empowered, that has more full awareness of the entirety of the situation, the part of you that knows the truth, right? That wise part of you that makes sound decisions from a place that is not an emotional high or an emotional low place. Maybe it's the CEO part of you. Maybe it's the investor of your future part of you. Maybe it's the child part of you that wants some comfort in this purchase that's in front of you. So I hope this makes sense, right? That we get to choose what part makes decisions. And it's that inner cheerleader, inner sage part, inner wisdom part, or some of these other parts that aren't actually serving us anymore. And our inner critic parts are the ones that aren't serving us anymore. And I'll give you a little example of this. And actually, it's an example of when my inner child got to make a decision. So there was one time I was with Ryan. We were in a vacation location. We were like at the beach. I think it was like Dewey Beach or something like that. And there was this cute little purse, but it felt really childish to me. There was like a turtle on it. It was very beachy. It was like teal color, right? Not a practical color. And it was small, and I kind of wanted to use it to put my phone and money and keys in when going for a walk on the beach. But I looked at it and I was like, oh, like this just feels like childish or young or youthful. I turned to my husband in the store and I was like, oh, like I know this like is so childish looking. I shouldn't buy it. And he said to me, you're allowed to want that. And wow, I was like, damn it, you're right. The one time, no, I'm just kidding. Ryan often has great little zingers like that. And I was like, right, yeah, why not? Like, I'm allowed to want this thing that feels youthful and childish. And maybe it's something that like I couldn't have afforded or wouldn't be able to get when I was like 10 or 12, but like it's cute and it makes me happy. And so, yeah, I did buy it because that little inner child in me wanted this fun thing to have at the beach. So, to wrap it up in a shell, no pun intended with the whole turtle situation, but really pay attention to what your inner critic is saying about finances, about resources, about what you can afford, what you can't afford, what's right, what's wrong, right? What you should, what you shouldn't do. Pay attention because you can then start to unravel this inner critic that has a hold on you, and you can start to make decisions from a part of you that is much more wise and much more up to date. And I say up to date because our inner critic is often coming from a place where they think that we're younger than we are. Like they're giving us counsel like we're 12 or 15 or 20, and we're not. But I digress. Let's move on to number 5. Number 5, it's really about being mindful about what you are blaming on finances, because this can create an energetic money block versus being honest that maybe that purchase just isn't the right fit for you. Maybe it doesn't align with your values. Maybe you don't want to spend that much on it. Maybe it's not the right time. And I say this because when we blame decisions on finances, it's often just the surface level reason why we say no. And it doesn't actually call to a deeper reason. Now, sometimes, right, there is a true financial reason, but there's usually something deeper under there. And those are some of the things that I mentioned, right? So come back to understanding your values and what's truly driving your decision, because then you can get out of the pattern of constantly blaming things on finances, which are probably not true, probably not the real reason why you're making that choice. Okay, now number 6. Now this is a doozy, and I actually did like an Instagram post about this a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago now. And number 6 is to look at the truth of your finances. And this is because a lot of people just listen to their inner critic who tells them all kinds of things, who tells them, you can't, you can't, you can't. And it's easy to believe that. It's easy to believe when your inner critic says, you can't quit your job. You won't you have a place to live, right? It's easy to believe you can't quit your job or everything's going to fall apart. You're not going to be able to live. You're not going to survive. And so the antidote to these inner critic messages is really to look at the truth of your finances, to really look at the numbers. Now, I have several clients, you may not know this, but I have several clients that are entrepreneurs. And one of the common themes I see is this aversion to looking at the finances. It's understandable. It's scary and all the reasons. But once we work through the blocks around looking at the numbers, around the fear of what they're going to find, they actually realize once they look at it, how empowering it is and how it helps them to make better business decisions. So I encourage you to look at your finances because knowledge is power, and knowing what your actual numbers are, knowing what your expenses are, knowing what your income is a form of empowerment so that you can make informed decisions. And another story I want to share with you around this, which is again, why it's so important to look at the truth of your finances. I have had countless clients come to me at the start of their engagement and they're really at the end of the rope on their jobs. And they come to me and they're like, I hate my job, but I can't afford to leave. And what's really interesting to me is that within months, oftentimes within months, they realize that leaving their job is what they must do because their heart and their soul is just calling them to move on. And they do make that decision. And part of it, of course, is like doing the work of really understanding what their truth is. And we work through all of that. But let me tell you, even though they may have come in thinking there's no way that they could, and then they did it, not a single one of them has ever landed on the streets. Nobody ever landed in a homeless shelter because they made that choice. And that's because the truth that they didn't see was that they could actually make it financially work. Now I can sit here and I can tell you, just do it. Just look at your finances. Look at the data. But I know it's not always just as simple as that because there can be really big emotional elements here. There can be serious history with finances and money and, big T trauma, little T trauma, all the things. So I just want to say that it might require you getting some support to be able to look at these things. And also, you might need some education. Maybe you don't know what to look at or how to look at it. So I definitely encourage you, if you just don't know where to start, if it just feels too big, too overwhelming, call a friend, reach out to your spouse, to your partner. Maybe you work with a coach. Maybe you read some books about money mindset stuff. Maybe you take an online course or watch some YouTube videos. There are so many resources available, no matter what your resource level is, to be honest. Like there is access to this information. And of course, you can absolutely reach out to me. If you're just like, I know I need to do this, I don't know how to start, please just reach out. All my contact information is in the show notes. See, the truth is that the truth of your finances will set you free, even if it's hard, even if it's emotional, because only by knowing the truth of what your finances are can you make aligned decisions that will enable you to play the long game of life, to not play the short game, the one decision at a time, but really understanding what that long-term view is of the life that you want to build for yourself. So I know these are 6 ideas, 6 thoughts that you can work with and practice. And I hope that you do. I hope that you do because you deserve to feel more levity in this aspect of your life. And it is one of those big aspects of our lives that create the most amount of stress, like money, love, these are the big things, right? And I just want to share a little bit of my journey with this. Maybe it's a little weird I'm putting it at the end, but there's a reason why I'm sharing this with you because I've been through my own journey on the financial money mindset stuff. Growing up, I was very aware of money challenges and I was always very cognizant of spending within my means. because I didn't want to be stressed out about it. But yes, I did take out loans for grad school. And yes, I did have credit card debt at times that I racked up. I was very acutely aware of finances growing up. Maybe I was more aware of it early on than I should have been, but that's okay because it made me be really focused on making sure I knew what I was doing in that category. Then you fast forward, and in my early years of my marketing career, I managed expense spreadsheets like a champ. I was used to reconciling spend. I was used to spending hours on end in budget spreadsheets. And I was used to working through what could be cut when budget cuts came down. I was used to looking at numbers, being creative, and critically thinking about the choices that we had on the business. Now, fast forward, when it came to my own business, I was very cognizant of managing, of documenting everything because I never wanted my business to be a hobby. I didn't want my personal funds and savings to prop up a business if the business didn't viably work. But also, in that journey, I made the mistake of beating myself up over what I saw in those spreadsheets as a new business owner. And I was stuck on measuring success in that one way of what was my profit? What was I making? you know? And even if my brain was telling me that I had to measure success in other ways, my inner critic was still running amok for many years in running my business. I had to work at it. And to be honest, I still have to work at it. Why? Because I still have not replaced my corporate salary. And that is just real talk right there. But I have finally come into acceptance of the truth of my financial situation, that I have certain privileges and I will not turn that into a weapon for not giving myself permission to invest in myself and give my business what it needs to grow in the long term. But it has taken me years to come to that. And I'm still very astute in making decisions, but I'm not using it to beat myself up. And I think that's really what all this comes down to. Like, let's not find another reason to create suffering on top of suffering in our lives. And if you've listened to this podcast, you've probably heard me say that phrase before. We cause suffering on top of suffering. And by addressing our inner critic as it relates to this topic, we can make it a little bit easier on ourselves. So do the work on your financial inner critic so that you can free yourself from the shackles that you put yourself in above and beyond the financial situation that you're in. I'm looking forward to hearing your stories about making decisions based on financial truth, not what your inner critic is telling you. Please reach out. I would love to hear what shifts for you as a result of hearing this topic today. I think the more that you can diffuse the high emotions related to finances and tap into the rational, calm, stable person that you are, the easier this is going to be for you. Like I said, get outside counsel if you need support on financial literacy, if you need someone to help you figure out how to get out of your debt. Like, you don't have to do this alone. There are so many resources out there. And I'll just go back to like the first step is just to investigate what are the thoughts, the beliefs that you have about money right now? What are the ones that you've been telling yourself for a long time? And that will pave the pathway to understanding what you actually believe about resources, about having enough, about being able to afford things. And that will help you in looking at the truth of what your situation is so that you can find more ease with it, with the pathway, and you can find more clearly that immediate next step that you need to get your financials in good working order. All right. Well, it's a new season. Literally, this is autumn. Change and transformation are in the air. So let that change and transformation come in your finance department, my friends. I'm rooting for you. And don't forget, I have lots of other episodes on inner critics. So if you have some other ones that are running around Maybe you have a food inner critic. Maybe you have one that tells you to maximize your time. Maybe you have one that tells you not to take a vacation. You can't do it. I have episodes on that. So you can become an expert in your own inner critic. That's what I wish for you, because the sooner that we understand it, the sooner we can make decisions that are actually for our highest good. All right. Thank you for being here with me today. And I look forward to seeing you next time in the Unlock Lab. And ciao for now.